Chalice here, star date 44309.1820, otherwise known as April 23rd, 2021 at 6:20 in the evening. I thought I would do a short video quickly before my usual Friday night activities begin. So let's get started. I want to talk a little bit about the general welfare clause that is in the Constitution. The General Welfare Clause, which states that in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, that so on and so forth, the Congress provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. So this little phrase has been taken to mean so many things that have gone way out of proportion. But what really the clause is saying is that this, to take care of the general welfare is a standard of performance for Congress to do, not a task, such as when you're giving a task to do, like you have to write a paper. Their general performance is double spaced, so many words, no grammatical errors, and so on and so forth. All those items are performance standards for your task. Your task is to write a paper, but the performance standards are those items I just mentioned, double spaced and so forth. That's the distinction, and that's the difference. So the general welfare is about the standard of performance of the federal government in their duties, not the task itself. So when they're doing their duties, and we really ought to get, that'll be another section, another video on what are really the duties of the federal government, and we find out that everything they're doing, about 99.9% of it, they're not authorized to do, especially lately. Earlier on, they were better at it. Today, I'm not sure that there is anything that they do is what they're supposed to do. So, so that's what general welfare means. It is a standard of performance. And how do you apply that to their duties? Like making treaties with other sovereign nations. So when they're making their treaties, their standard of performance is to keep in mind the general welfare of the country as a whole, not to agree to any terms that harm the country or take away the liberties of the people. No treaty can do that, and that's a whole nother topic. But treaties cannot infringe or not impose anything on individuals, which pretty much nullifies the NAFTAs 1 and 2 and almost any and all treaties. That's an example of the government's standard of performance to keep in mind the general welfare. So when they're conducting these negotiations, they have to keep in mind the general welfare of the country. Which means that the general welfare does not mean Social Security, does not mean welfare provisions for the poor, or anything else they do, and we'll get to a little more detail about that in a minute. Madison himself says that the clause was made to instruct the purpose of the limited delegated powers of the government, of Congress in particular. The clause was made to instruct the purpose of those powers that they were given, not a power in and of itself. So general welfare is not a power given to the government, to the Congress. It is an instruction to the purpose of the power that they were given, so that the federal government will use those powers for the Union as a whole, not for any individual states, any individual classes of people, or anything like that. So what are those limited and delegated powers? That's a topic for another video, and that would be fun to get into, I think, because there's a whole lot. The limited powers are this much what they're authorized to do. What they're doing now, this much, this much, this much. Yeah, I can't even reach that far. Nobody can. That's a whole other thing. But the general welfare is a standard of performance. It is the basis of consideration when the Congress is doing the job it's supposed to do. Madison goes on to say that if Congress can use money without constraint for the general welfare, then they can start taking religion into their own hands. They've already been doing that. If you look around, you'll see. Well, anyway, I'll get to it, then I'll show you. Religion in their own hand. Appoint teachers and educate the children. Guess what? We have a Department of Education. Guess what else? Another agency, another unlawful agency, and that Department of Education makes rules and regulations that cannot possibly be lawful because their entire existence is not authorized. So the Department of Education, this is what happens when you start taking the general welfare literally, and the Congress start spending money for the general welfare, and that's not their job. Another thing they'll do is take over road regulation. Well, what do we have there? Go driving around, you'll see there is essentially no road that's not taken over by government. In fact, a little bit of an aside here, if you're going to homeowners associations and stuff, all that property belongs to them, including the roads. What they'll do is they'll dedicate the roads to the county in violation of our liberties and property rights. Why an entity would willingly give property rights to a government is beyond me. They steal enough. The government steals enough. We don't have to give them any. But anyway, road regulation. Police. Yes. All the way down to the police. How many policing forces are influenced, bought, supplied by the federal government? Not even just FBI and CIA and all that crap, but local police departments. Aren't they provided funding? Aren't they provided training by the feds for various and sundry unauthorized things? Yes, down to the police. The feds have taken over the police. I'm pretty sure there's no police department who will turn them down because guess what? Money talks. And of course, provision for the poor. I'm not going to be very popular after this one, but the truth is, it is not the federal government's job to take care of the poor. And there are plenty of smart people who talk about the status of the poor and how they really are, and also the poor, the federal government gives to the poor. That is a matter of subjugation. That is a form of slavery. When the government dictates how you can live, what is that? So I'm not going to be popular after all this. So I can't not say it just because of that. But so it is. So then it is not for the government to look after the people. That's not their job. They're not our mommies and daddies. They're not our babysitters. It is to us to take care of ourselves. And that's our job, not the government. How in the world is the government sitting over there in Washington, D.C. or wherever they are? How can they possibly know somebody sitting in Florida, in Texas, in anywhere in the Midwest, in California, New York, in any of all the 50 states? How can anybody sitting in Washington possibly know what these people need? There's no way. Not even the representatives. I mean, they're supposed to represent us. Do they really? Can they really? Because they live in Washington. They stay in Washington. All their time is up there in the Washington vicinity. How much time do they spend down in their districts? Well, they come to visit and have campaign rallies when it's time for re-election and such. But other than that, how could they possibly know? How do they know what it's like to have to work 2 jobs to just to pay their rent, let alone get food. How could they possibly know? They don't. They don't know. And so human nature, no matter how good you are, human nature is that if you're not experiencing it, the more time that goes by, the less that it's in your mind, and so once it's out of your mind, then you're just not gonna bother with it. So and originally, I mean, the intent, how the Congress people were supposed to go, it was not supposed to be a full-time job. It was not supposed to be a career. It was not supposed to be to make your name. It was supposed to be, you represent your people. You live in the town that you represent. You live there. You work there. Your job is there. Going to Congress and doing a congressional session is a temporary job, a temporary assignment, just for that period. It's not a permanent thing. So you live and work in the district that you represent. That's where you stay. That's where you are. You go to Washington, do your congressional things for however many weeks they have their sessions, and then and you get a stipend for being up there, and for some of your lodging and food, whatever, you get a stipend and you spend it how it is. Then when you're done, you come back home and go back to your job. Obviously, the job's not going to fire you because you went up to do that. Much like if you were in the reserves, a week in the month, 2 weeks out of the year, you have to go do your reservist task like you're active, and the job where you're working has to hold your job open. And really, any employer should want to. They shouldn't be made to have to. They should want to just because of that. So there is that parallel. As a reservist. So that's how the Congress, the people in Congress are supposed to be. That's how they do their job. They don't live up there. It's not a full-time job, and it's not a career. So your career is in your district. Now, for the senators who represent the states, they represent the states, and they're only up there during the times when the states as a whole, as a collective, need some things to be done. And then there's also the president who reports to the Senate for the State of the Union, whatever, the occasional State of the Union. Another thing we could get into, it's not supposed to be publicized, but it has become a way to get for the presidents to get in front of the camera and brag about themselves and all this junk. Really, talk about an ego trip. But that's all that has become, an ego trip. It was supposed to be the president from time to time advises the Senate, because the Senate represents the states, and that's the president's job, and we can get into that another time as well. You know what the president talks to the Senate. That's the State of the Union address. Say, I've got this treaty working on over here. I've got consultations working on this one, and we've got this treaty ready to go. I leave it with you for approval, to review and approve or not, or to make adjustments. You see, that's the job. Very simple, very straightforward. It does not require tens of trillions of dollars to do their job. So it is unbelievable how far off the rails it has gone, and really why? Because people don't know. We don't know. We're not taught. We're not taught in schools the job of the government. So which is why the government likes to appoint teachers and educate children, because it's for itself. And and that's a natural thing. That's why it's our job not only to take care of ourselves, but to hold the reins of the government, much like you hold the reins of a horse when you're galloping along, and you move the horse this way and that. That's our job, to hold the reins of the government. We were empowered to do so. It is our responsibility and our duty to do so. And to not do so is failing as a citizen. So there we are. That's a little bit about the general welfare clause, and Madison spoke a lot to it. There were in the resolutions. There was a lot spoken about it, and there was some debate on to put it in, to put it not in. That the those who created the Constitution were deathly afraid of a central government getting out of hand. So they actually put in this clause as a way to identify the standards of performance of the Congress when they're doing their limited tasks. So there is a general welfare clause explained. And remember, if you let the government take care of you, the government will control you. Right. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope it gives you some thought, some things to consider, or just in one ear and out the other. But at least it's out there, and you take it as you will. This is Chalice signing off and saying, as always, stay courageous.